There we go. So I know some of you are really experienced coaches and parents, while others are perhaps just starting their BKL journey. And my goal with this presentation is that hopefully everyone can learn a little something. I know I certainly learned a lot putting it together. So without further ado, I will pull up my slides here. All right, so this talk is on, as it says right here, on the BKL philosophy, the Bill Koch League philosophy, and long-term athlete development. I'll start with an outline here, which I hope you're all as excited about as I was to wear cheese on top of my head at my first BKL festival over there on the right. So I'll start out with some background on Bill Koch himself, the league, and the philosophy, before moving on to examine a case study looking at the general state of sports, youth sports in America, and the roadblocks that limit access to athletics and athletic development. Then we'll move on to some models, methods, and best practices used in the BKL that support the foundational philosophy, long-term athlete development, and address some of the issues inherent in the broader youth sport system. Yeah. Just admitting one more person there. Then I'll talk about coaching for long-term development. Coaches are key in implementing these practices and methods. So we'll cover some coaching best practices that will wrap up with some important points from the Aspen Institute about coaching during a pandemic. Then I'll conclude with some thoughts on the importance of the greater BKL community and fostering an inclusive and supportive environment for our children. So, starting with a little bit of background about the man behind the league, Bill Koch grew up in Vermont and won a silver medal in the 1976 Winter Olympics in Innsbruck, Austria. His medal was the first Olympic medal in cross-country skiing in the US. And after that, the Youth League in New England was named after Bill. And he and his wife, Kate, are still very involved and make sure that the philosophy of the league stays true to its roots. That philosophy being that children should have the opportunity to have fun while learning to cross-country ski. And so the guiding principle of BKL is really to create a safe and healthy environment where children can develop physically, psychologically, and socially. And instruction is centered around learning by doing and the child's needs. Which brings us to the Children's Bill of Rights, which is in our BKL Parent Leader manual on our website. And I'll highlight sort of a few of these rights that I think are important to draw attention to. So first, the right to participate at a level appropriate to individual skill development, the right to participate in a physically, psychologically, and emotionally safe environment, the right to play as a child and not as an adult, and the right to have fun through sport. And so speaking to that, to creating a safe environment for our children, we recommend everyone working with kids in the BKL complete Safe Sport training. Safe Sport's an independent nonprofit that's committed to building sport community where participants can work and learn together free of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse and misconduct. And this is an online training course, and there's info about this too on the BKL page on NENSA. And also on the same topic here, we also recommend background checks for anyone working with kids. So now we'll move on to look at this case study that I mentioned in the outline. So this study considers the general state of youth sports in America and the roadblocks that limit access to athletics and athletic development. So the world our kids grew up in today looks really different than the world we grew up in 20 or 30 or more years ago. There's a lot more technological distraction. Our culture is more sedentary. Kids are playing a lot less. The youth sport culture has changed. It's become a billion-dollar industry. There are elite and travel teams for really young kids. Prices are going up while the age to play is going down. And parents, feel pressure sometimes against their better judgment to keep up with all of this. So in response to sort of this state of things, the Aspen Institute Sport and Society program created Project Play in 2013 to find ways to help all children in America become active through sports. And in 2015, they published a 48-page report, that's the cover page we have here, Sport for All, Play for Life, which outlines the issues present in youth sport culture today and offers a new model for youth sports in America with eight strategies to address these issues. Also, each year now, Project Play follows up with a yearly assessment called the State of Play that kind of monitors these important things they've outlined and trends year to year, and sort of see where everything is moving relative to this initial publication. So why focus on getting kids out and getting kids active? So this graphic shows that it kind of condenses some research indicating that active kids do better in life on many fronts, and youth sports provide a safe environment to develop character and learn valuable life lessons such as overall health, leadership, communication, and accountability. And so you can see down here is sort of the progression from early childhood to adulthood. And you can kind of see each step along this developmental path, there are benefits to being active. And I think the really important part about this graphic here is how this progression then comes full circle in what we call the intergenerational cycle, where active parents encourage their children to be active. And that's the cycle we're referring to, and the pattern repeats. So what are some of the studies showing? What is the state of sports that I'm referring to? So kids are leaving sport. Between 2008 and 2013, about 2.6 million kids left sports. That's over the span of not a lot of time. And this graphic shows that children across many sports are no longer playing. So we have these 6 sports along here. We have the numbers that were playing in 2008 and the numbers that were playing in 2013. And then you can see here the percent decline in participation. And so this graphic kind of shows what they used as indicators of early success or access to sport for children. So here's age. Where is my mouse? Oh, there it is. Age along here, and then sort of different variables along here. And then this is showing the average age that children start joining sports teams. And the largest driver of early participation is household income, which you can see right here. So the wealthier children were getting into sports way earlier than less wealthy children. So income's a huge factor. And I think it's super important that we mention the racial wealth gap that is sort of implicit in this income differential. And so because in our country, income and race are really tightly correlated, and I think that's something we should acknowledge in this. And so this graph is specifically looking at the white-black wealth gap, and I'll explain this here briefly. So this blue line up here is tracking the median wealth of white families over time, and this yellow line down here is the the median wealth of Black families over time. And then this is the median wealth, or not the median wealth, the 75th percentile wealth of Black families. So there's a huge gap, and that's bundled up in that barrier to entry with income. And in that, in 2016, the typical white family had about 10 times the wealth of the typical Black family. So race is bundled up in that income differential pretty tightly. So what does today's model look like? And so this is a visual representation of today's broken model of youth sports. You can see it's this pyramid here. The pyramid gets narrower towards the top, and it pushes kids out. There's not room for everyone at the top. Kids get pushed aside who want to keep playing, but for a variety of reasons can't. And preparation is often geared toward short-term winning and not long-term development. And a lot of kids overcompete and undertrain, and kids just aren't having fun. And they don't get those fundamental movement skills, which can result in children losing options for participating in physical activities and sports. So Project Play is suggesting a new model, squaring the pyramid. So it's sports for all, play for all, and this basically encourages athletes to be active at every level of life. So you can see down here, the foundation is physical literacy that supports lifelong engagement in sports at any level. We'll talk a bit more about physical literacy later. And so basically what you can see here is with this foundation can feed into any level of sport. And this is BKL down here up to age 12. And I think participation, this foundation is super important, not just for physical well-being as children grow up and become adults, but also has big physical as well as social benefits later in life. In that, adults they feel capable to join a club or an intramural team, and they have like the basic skills and knowledge of some different sports. They can be active, and they can use sports as a way to meet new people, make connections, form communities. So it can really benefit people throughout their whole life. So the goal of Project Play is to embrace a sport model that welcomes all children, and that's pretty much what we were just looking at. Their hope is that every child will have the ability, the confidence, and the desire to be physically active for life. And they hope that every child will be physically literate by the age of 12. And so how do you foster ability? So ability would be through informal play and intentional teaching of basic movement skills that children can apply to any sport. Confidence would be built by providing opportunities, support, and encouragement for all children, regardless of their background or ability. And desire is sort of fostered by providing early positive experiences that are fun and motivate children to stay involved. So what can you do as a coach or a leader or a parent? So this Sport for All, Play for Life playbook recommends 8 plays that are pretty well embodied in the BKL League. And I'll step you through them here. So ask kids what they want. Youth sport is organized by adults, and look to kids to find out what they want out of their sport experience. Reintroduce free play. Many sporting opportunities are overstructured. I've observed children make huge improvements while having a total blast on skis, playing in a really unstructured environment, just, for example, building, jumps in a snow pile with their friends. Encourage sports sampling. So it's better to try a few sports than focus on one too early. So give children the opportunity to learn what sports they actually like. You won't know you like, I don't know, mountain biking if you never have the opportunity to try it, or running, or yeah, let them try out some sports. Revitalize in-town leagues. So there's a lot of rising costs and commitments with some of these travel leagues that they're referring to before. And so providing community-based, low-cost programs that are accessible to all kids, not just youth with resources and ambition to participate on travel teams. And this is really well embodied in the BKL. So think small and simple, and be creative in the use and development of play spaces. So in skiing, we have the whole outdoors. So you can utilize that whether or not there's snow, and there's so many fun games and activities that you can do on foot. You can also take some beater skis out in the grass. That's always a good time. Design for development. So make sure activity plans are age appropriate and address the needs of children, the individual children. Train coaches. Coaches are the delivery mechanism for quality sport programming. They can create athletes for life or wreck their enthusiasm for sport altogether. So get them trained in key competencies, including safety, sports skills, and general coaching philosophy. US Ski and Snowboard offers some coach training. At NENSA, we're looking to develop some coach training that focuses more on like younger youth programs. You can also develop some club-based education, and we're always here as a resource if you have questions or are looking for support. So emphasize prevention, prevent injuries, but especially concussions, and know how to manage them if they do occur. So I'll take a pause here. If anyone has any questions before I move on to the next section. All right, so I'm going to transition on to talking about models, best practices, techniques, and concepts that address issues inherent in the greater youth sports system and that are used in BKL to foster engagement and long-term development. So this graphic here is the American Development Model. And in 2014, the USOC embraced the American Development Model to unify national governing bodies and community programs in keeping Americans active in sport longer. And so this is a 5-stage pathway, as you can see, that's a pathway of development focusing on fun at each level. And I really like how this final 5th stage is about thriving and being a mentor and active for life. And so in my personal development, I've moved currently from the high performance into the active for life category up here in number 5. And so the long-term athlete development model, the namesake of the presentation. So this model is embraced by the US Ski and Snowboard and reflects the squared pyramid shown earlier from the Aspen Institute with their new model of youth sport development. So the focus here is on long-term gains and not short-term competition success. The goal is to develop fundamentals, athleticism, and a passion for sport. And the idea behind long-term athletic development is essentially what BKL clubs have been doing for years, which is letting kids have fun while learning how to cross-country ski and focusing on building blocks of movement before focusing on specific skills. So you can see the BKL block down here, founded on with like physical literacy is this building block for everything else that comes later. So you can follow into the junior racing and then the elite path over here, or go straight into lifelong participation, and you can move from any of these steps into lifelong participation. So there's a place for everyone. And so the aim in BKL is not necessarily to create high performing athletes, but rather to create healthy, active individuals who know how to move well and enjoy being outside. So the next model, or it's more a system that I'll touch on, is the US Ski and Snowboard's cross-country training system, which is based off of long-term athlete development and is specifically created for cross-country skier development. And it focuses on age-appropriate training and competition. And so it's broken down, each of these phases is broken down into development periods. So you can see each phase is blocked out in a different color. And this system takes sensitive periods for maximal development into account as well. And don't feel like you have to like stick your face in your computer and read all the little words. We're gonna go over some of the phases that are covered in BKL right now. So phase 1, 2 to 6 years old, 1 to 4 years in sport. So focus on play and not training. No one needs to be training at this age. Just get kids out in the outdoors, have fun recreating with your family, introduce different activities, go hiking, go biking, throw a ball. And through the first 2 bullet points there, through just playing and having fun outside, kids will develop these fundamental athletic movements and developments. And as you can see, really focused on the fun part over here. So phase 2, 6 to 10 years old, 1 to 4 years in sport. Still focusing on activity and not training. Just focus on kids engaging in fun sports they enjoy. Encourage kids to play multiple sports. They might not know what they like best, and they won't find new ones if they don't try other sports. Get involved with some team sports. These are a great way for kids to develop ethics and fair play, and also a great way for them to meet some new friends. Not that you can't meet new friends. People meet new friends through skiing too. Just, that's a team. It's a team sport. And also teaching skills through games. It's a really just fun, engaging way to get some development going, but in a really fun with a fun method. And so phase 3, still using games, skills-based games. So that's really similar, kind of along the same lines as phase 2. You kids can start doing some fun races if they're interested in that. Let them give that a go. Still participating in multiple sports and still focusing on fun. Many kids drop out at this age, so we need to still keep things fun and enjoyable, and training doesn't have to be specific to be beneficial. So in talking about these phases, obviously we were mentioning some ages there. So it's important to sort of dig into the idea of age a little bit more, especially in terms of training phases or developmental phases. So a child's chronological age is their biological age, and their developmental age takes into account physical, mental, cognitive, and emotional maturity. So some kids go through puberty earlier than others and may be ready for more sooner than late matures. But it's important not to push those earlier matures too far too fast. Just as it's also important not to keep late matures, or it's important to keep late matures motivated, as they might not be as fast as their more developed peers. So those are just some things to be aware about. And I just want to bring things quickly back to the end goal here of being active for life, and just that it's important to keep in mind for leaders that there are many pathways. Development's sort of a fun and winding path, not a strict pipeline. Skiers can transition from developing physical literacy or from a podium pathway to enjoying lifelong physical activity, participation in sport, and engagement in an activity. I really like this image here for active for life and touching on that intergenerational cycle. This photo is from the Stowe Mini Marathon, which is an awesome event that I personally enjoyed very much as a BKLer myself, where participants ski a marathon course from feed station to feed station with friends and family members. And so this image here, you have 3 dads with their daughters. So they're out there, those are parents out there sharing their love of sport with with their kids, which is pretty cool. And eating blueberry soup, I think, which is very tasty. Yeah, so again, if anyone has any questions or anything to add, do jump in. I'm going to move on now to the nuts and bolts of some of these methods that we've talked about, these methods and models, and kind of talk about how they can be implemented, go into a little bit more detail. I just want to kind of set the tone with the BKL model of instruction, which is that developing aptitudes is the primary mission of instruction, while the refinement of technique is secondary. And so it's sort of the overarching principle. So we've talked about physical literacy, we've touched on it. I'm going to dive into it a little bit more here. It's a very important foundation that everything else rests on. So we've seen it in the models. It pretty much is what it sounds like, learning how to move well and put together the basic building block movements that make us human. So it encompasses those basic movements, fundamental movement skills, and that's what those foundational sports skills are built on. It's ideally developed prior to the adolescent growth spurt around 12 years old. So as you've mentioned before, it's most of the BKL experience. And the goal with developing physical literacy is so that people will have the motivation, confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and understanding to value and take responsibility for engagement in physical activities for life. So what are these skills that skills that underpin physical literacy? These movement skills we've been talking about. So physical literacy can't happen without agility, balance, and coordination. And so I just want to kind of go through each one quickly and give you an example of how that would apply in skiing. So agility would help you step around corners and maybe avoid that occasional rock in the trail on a low snow day. Balance helps you ride that gliding ski. And coordination helps skiers make fluid motions on their skis in varying terrain. So step back a moment and look at sort of overall movement progressions through development. So young kids start out with basic childhood movement patterns. So they learn posture to crawl, walk, run, climb, throw. So it's sort of this PAL progression, this posture, arms, legs progression. And they start kind of putting everything together and moving about on their own. Then we have jumping and mechanics. So learning how to land, stabilize, jump, bound, hop, sort of apply power to those initial movement patterns. And the third step is then taking all those building blocks and putting those movements towards development of sport specificity. So the classic kick, double pull, V1, V2, etc. Now we're going to talk about games, because games are an awesome way to develop these ABCs, the agility, balance, and coordination, and they provide a challenge, stimulation, a chance for everyone to feel successful. It's really great to find a good balance between playing games and learning other skills at practice. So one model I would suggest is to work on a skill, play a game that reinforces that skill, and then return to the skill to reinforce what was taught and provide feedback. Play games purposefully and integrate them into your practice. Don't play the same game for too long. Observe the children, change things up, keep things exciting, keep them in this flow channel. So I really like this graphic here. So this is the flow channel, and the idea here is that you want the skill or the activity to be challenging without causing anxiety, but also not so easy that kids get bored. So you find this balance here that keeps them in this flow channel where they can learn and have fun learning. So now I'll elaborate a little bit more on games and specifically deliberate play and the advantages and benefits there. So one positive outcome, or one positive aspect of games and deliberate play, is that these activities are intrinsically motivating and designed to maximize enjoyment for the participants, for the kids playing. Deliberate play instills a love of the sport that is at the core of great athletes and encourages long-term participation. It also helps develop overall athleticism and movement skills. It stimulates brain development, so critical thinking, problem solving, making snap decisions on the fly. And it also, it can also help with team building and community building, and especially cooperative games can help with that. And to quote Jamie Hannon, who is a BKL leader and a professor at Plymouth State, games teach cooperation and are instrumental in transforming a group of individuals into a community. Of course, you know, you get extra benefits if you have, if your games involve large pieces of machinery like gravel sorters. That's not the case actually, but they make a really nice backdrop. They're fun to look at. So we'll move on and talk about specialization. This is an important thing to talk about with developing athletes and developing skiers. So different sports have different times of specialization or peak performance, and some are early specialization, require early specializations, such as, that's mostly like acrobatic sports like gym, diving, figure skating. Skiing and other endurance sports have late specialization, and so that's just really important to keep in mind as we work with children. And I included this photo here to sort of to highlight Rita-Lisa Ropinen, who's a Finnish 5-time Olympian cross-country skier. She's raced in World Cups and at World Champs as a 40-year-old and is still going strong, which is awesome. Also got to mention that when Keegan and Jesse won their Olympic gold medal in 2018, Keegan was 35. So there's a lot of success to be had at later ages in this sport, which is pretty awesome. So we'll move on to talking sort of about the downsides to specializing too early. And I figured to keep people engaged, if we're getting some Zoom fatigue, if anyone wants to jump in here and share some negative outcomes that they can think of that would come about from specializing too early in one sport. If anyone wants to jump in here or pop one in the chat. If I can see the chat.
I'll go, Kate.
Okay.
I haven't been at Craftsbury with working with kids long enough to have really seen much of this yet, but you start to see the warning signs of burnout. I feel like when kids feel like there's pressure or expectations being put on them, whether parents mean to do it or not, or even from just the sort of social pressure that kids can influence on each other of wanting to feel cool enough to be super specialized in their sport before it's really, really necessary. So yeah, I feel like I like to focus on minimizing that, any sort of perceived pressure or expectations.
Yep. Thanks, Audrey. Yeah, Sue Weems in the comments mentioned burnout as well too. And then we have overuse injuries from Brian. So yeah, those are all really salient points. And so yeah, it's a development of the lack of those basic skills of agility, balance, and coordination. Overuse injuries was mentioned, and yeah, speaking to Audrey and Sue, early burnout and retirement just from Oh, we got another comment here. Yep, a good one from Jim. Early performance followed by disappointments and quitting. So speaking to that early burnout and retirement. So if you do specialize too early, you could have some initial success there. It could pay off in the short term, but the likelihood that you'll be able to maintain that throughout your career is low. And so if you do have that low point following early success, it definitely contributes to higher rates of burnout. That's for sure.
This ties into it too, Kate, but I think just anxiety in general around performance, and that is what James is referring to, but I think that that's really common for young kids, like this pressure that they put on themselves and then getting really anxious whenever there's a bib on.
Yeah.
But if we can make it fun when they're putting the bib on, then that is going to really create this love for, lifelong sport.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Thanks for sharing, Colin. Yeah. My last little bullet point here was that if they specialize too early, they might also miss out on another sport that they might enjoy that they don't even know about. Yeah, thank you all for jumping in there. That was great. So one way that we can help minimize the likelihood of specializing too early is by encouraging sport sampling and trying out a variety of sports. This can be team sports or other endurance sports. And so what are the benefits here? More kids find a sport they like or that they feel they want to do. There's an increased transfer of skills. So you develop different skills in different sports, but they can be transferred between sports. And so I personally think a lot of my balance and coordination that I had as a young skier actually came from my like figure skating career. And yeah, obviously like fitness can be transferred between a lot of different endurance sports. So that's important. Increased confidence. You're more capable in different activities. You have a diverse set of skills. You kind of have you got a variety going on. All your eggs aren't in one basket, and that can help with confidence. And kids play sports longer. And they stay invested longer usually when they have a more variety of sports. And I also wanted to kind of throw out there that even at much older athletes, professional athletes, that when they are fully focused on one sport, like skiing, there are a lot of beneficial modes of cross training that are utilized even at the highest levels, such as mountain biking or road biking, a lot of running. And so I think it's important to realize that kind of fostering, there's a lot of benefits at that younger age for fostering sport sampling, but also if a child does choose to go down, they continue with competition, they pursue it to the highest level, that developing some of those sports and comfort with those sports can really support their career at the highest level and give them a lot of awesome cross training opportunities that help them stay in the game longer as a high level athlete as well. So speaking of racing and high level athletes and competition, basically. So as children develop and try racing or are exposed to some more competitive aspects of the sport through games, it's important to articulate a clear philosophy around competition. So competitions at the BKL level should be designed to teach each athlete to participate to the best of their respective abilities. And the most likely path to high performance for kids is to enjoy their sport and as a result put in the time and effort to train. And so basically personal improvement as the measure of success, and create goals that are not results related. Winning isn't the ultimate success. And at least on a personal level for me, some of my most memorable races in my professional career were not actually the ones that I won. So now we'll transition over to focus on coaching. If anyone, this is another sort of break moment. If anyone wants to jump in with questions or comments, feel free to do so. We'll move over to coaching now. So while I use the word coach here, I'm also referring to BKL leaders and parents. Oh, we got a question. One moment. Okay, so we have a comment from Alice Goodwin that seems like the BKL festival is pretty competitive. Okay, that's good. That's interesting feedback to hear. That's good to know. Maybe something that we can talk about more. because it's definitely want that to be a place for everyone to be involved. Yeah, okay, so we have, I'm guessing because I'm screen sharing, people can actually see these comments, but I'll read them out. So Anna says she agrees and would love to see less emphasis on timed racing. And Kevin says definitely very little for a recreational skier to do. And it seems, and some skiers only want to do alpine. Okay. It was actually really interesting. So I was at, in terms of the not timing races, last winter I was at a BKL race in Craftsbury, and that was not a timed event. Also, they didn't separate out boys and girls, because at that level, there's not a huge difference. There's not a lot of physiological sex differences. And so they just combined everyone. Oh, interesting. Anna, if you wanted to share that, if people are interested, you could drop that link into the chat. If folks want to read that, she has an article about Norway not timing races for kids up to 12 years, which is, yeah, what they were doing in Craftsbury. Cool. Well, thank you all for sharing and jumping in there.
If I could jump in for one quick second,
Yeah.
I totally agree with the Norway philosophy and the not timing races, and they have a policy against posting order of finish for younger kids. But we actually last February break went to Norway and joined in one of the kids races there. And what was really interesting was that it was a great inclusive atmosphere for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But they did have times, and they put those up briefly, and every parent was interested. Every parent took a picture of it, on their phone. And then later they didn't publish the times for the kids under, I guess it was age 12, honestly. I think it might have been a little bit younger than that. But, it's an interesting dynamic where there are kids, and there's certainly parents who are motivated by the competition and that sort of balance. And so it was interesting to see how they do have this national policy. They certainly did that with respect to rewards, the awards and sort of the final results that were posted. But for the people who were interested in that, that was still accessible.
Yeah. Okay.
And it seemed to work in a healthy way. But yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good to hear about. And I think we don't necessarily want racing to necessarily be viewed as like a bad thing either. I think it can be a really awesome learning experience if it is approached and talked about in the right way for kids. I think there's definitely, like you're saying, a balance to strike there for sure. And I think at the BKL Festival, I believe we now have an option where you can sign up and not participate in any of the races. You can just do the fun activities. And so I think that's awesome, because then kids have that opportunity to choose which, what they want to do basically, which I think is great. So the kids who want to compete have that opportunity, and those who want to maybe ski the mini marathon or participate in the bump jump have that opportunity too. And the kids who are racing can do the other activities as well. So yeah.
Hey Kate, this is Brian. Do you mind if I chime in there, because that article is wrong. And that's one of the reasons why we had Britt Bedishall join us last year at our National Coaches Symposium. Mm-hmm. And Matt's evaluation is right. So what they do, and the reason why Norway did that is because they are so hyper-focused on performance at an extremely young age.
Yeah.
And so they start competition around the age of 2 or 3 with their athletes. But you're right, Matt, and you're right. The article is somewhat right. They post by alphabetical order, and they try to do that so that the parents aren't so hyper-focused. So competition is important, but also framing it is also important. So Kate, what you just said is balance is really critical. And, just to the comment of the BKL festival and just, strengthening your comments is that, it's really important. Maybe the BKL festival overall might be somewhat competitive. Maybe that's the one and only event, but the local BKLs, like untimed sort of things, that they should be in place. And competition and collaboration and cooperation should be integral in the coaching on a daily basis in programs. So a great way to do that is kind of building fair relays and that sort of thing. So I just, I don't want to come off and sound like that I'm like hyper focused on competition, but people have to recognize, number one, that Norway article was written by Americans and is wrong. Number two, yeah, the reason why they do it that way is because Norway is so hyper focused on competition, and they are trying to get their community and their parents in particular to be less hyper focused on competition. Yeah, so I just thought I better chime in on that topic because that's come up along a lot of times. But just to be clear, that that article has been time and again been debunked.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks for jumping in there, Brian. I appreciate it. All right. Well, I'll for now keep moving on and dive into some coaching best practices here. And yeah, as I said, that I'm referring to not just coaches, but leaders and parents and anyone who's involved in leading with a BKL in the BKL. So there's plenty more best practices. I pulled some that I wanted to focus on here today, and there are more awesome practices listed in the BKL manual on our website. But I'll move through these 5 that I pulled today. So keep it simple and short. So essentially do more and talk less, because kids learn by doing. They want to be active. At least in a lot of the programs I've helped with, they come right from school. They've been in a fairly structured environment most of the day, and you definitely want to lend some structure, but also give them the opportunity to really learn by doing. So relate to previously learned info. So work off the foundational knowledge that they already have from their previous ski or activity experience. And you can also make analogies to things they're familiar with. So like when I'm teaching downhill technique, we talk about like pizza and fries for snowplow and parallel. There's plenty of other fun analogies there. So create a coach-athlete connection, build trust, get to know the athletes individually. Make sure they know that you care about them as a person and not just a skier. And fun means different things at different ages. So older kids will love going down a giant hill, but the younger ones might find it a bit scary. So sort of guide your practice. Make your practices age appropriate so that they have fun. Create a learning environment. So foster a safe space where children feel comfortable taking risks and making mistakes that they can learn from. And so I want to touch on some coaching roles. There are a lot of coaching roles. And so you sort of adopt many of these roles in your time as a coach. And so, yeah, it kind of requires some adaptability, really focus on your strengths and reach out in your club for support and enlist that BKL community. So I'll just run through these roles here. We've got counselor, teacher and instructor, motivator, supervisor, technician, tactician, caregiver, ambassador, and club organizer. And sometimes you're the hydrator over here. So as a coach, you can be a really, really key in creating a positive team culture. And so it's important to create a culture where children feel supported and can connect with each other and work together and really, really build each other up. And so placing, an emphasis on cooperation and not competition within your team. And one primary way to create this positive culture is to manage risk. And so I'll spend a little bit of time talking about risk. So risk doesn't always look like something explicitly risky, like going off a giant jump. Many risks are social in nature, and fear of risk undermines the learning ability to form regular memory pathways. So social risk. What is a social risk? What is that? So that could be you're scared of looking silly. You don't want to be made fun of. You don't want your friends or the other kids in your group to think you're weird. And, you know, that could be trying and failing. You fall down. You don't want to look or feel incompetent. And so physical risk can be used as a mask for social risk. So, you know, it's possible that a child might not actually be scared of actually skiing down the steep downhill. They're just scared of doing it in front of people and maybe falling and you know, looking silly in front of their friends or teammates. So yeah, that's kind of an important way to look at, to assess risk. So why would we minimize this social risk? Why would we spend limited practice time on creating this group culture? So the first is lower social risk increases skill development. So children learn better when everyone actually learns better, when fear is managed. There's also greater learning retention when social risk is minimized. So human neurobiology prevents learning when faced with unmanaged fear, and social fears are usually more real and more powerful than physical fears. Also, minimizing social risk contributes to the development of social and emotional intelligence. And this sort of gets back to the idea that we're creating not just good people, or sorry, yeah, we're not just creating good skiers, but we're creating good people. It's also just more fun when you're not faced with social risk. So how do you go about minimizing social risk? There's a few action items. Learn and use names. It's simple, but it goes a long way, and children feel seen and included. Play some icebreakers. This is a good way to kind of break down some social barriers and experiment with social risk and assess kind of the comfort level that children have. Foster an open dialogue. Discuss the culture you wish to cultivate and make it a group goal. Really spend time on this, especially in the early season, with skiers, parents, and coaches. And praise risk-taking and compassionate responses. So, you know, if a child goes out of their comfort zone and takes a risk, you know, that's awesome. And when you see, you know, really encourage compassionate responses, like amongst the team, amongst the athletes with each other, and acknowledge those responses. Model the behaviors yourself. So take risks, fall, be goofy, show them that it's okay. It's okay to be silly. It's okay to fall. It's okay to try and fail. We're all still there for each other and support each other. So adventure is an awesome way of doing things where there's a certain outcome, but there's an outcome that results in exploration and risk-taking in the context of a supportive community. Adventures are also really memorable and challenging and fun. As a kid, I always loved going off the groomed trails and adventuring in the woods with my friends and my family. You know, adventures can take many forms, like maybe riding the pump track and trying some new features, or skiing longer than you ever have before, like doing a marathon with your friends. I think a key thing is that adventures are usually always better with friends. So as I was talking about being a role model and taking risks yourself, yeah, realize that children are always watching and listening. And so they pick up on a lot, and you don't know what will stick with them. And so just act in ways you want your skiers to act. Show them you enjoy being active and outside. Be kind and compassionate. Have fun and be goofy. Be yourself. So I'm wrapping up this section on coaching with a little discussion from a recent Aspen Institute webinar about prioritizing life skills as we return to play. So kind of touching on coaching in a pandemic. I know some clubs have been operating all summer, while others are just starting up. So there's a lot of uncertainty. This is not focused on logistical considerations for coaching in a pandemic, but rather looks at the mental and emotional side and how coaches and leaders can prioritize these life skills and overall well-being. And the content of this webinar really fits well within the BKL philosophy. So a lot of children are experiencing trauma and grief right now at varying levels with this pandemic. 20% prior to the pandemic, 20% of children were already living with a mental health challenge, and 80% of those children don't receive the support they need. So there's a real lack of support. Sports can be healing, and many kids turn to sports as their outlet and a place to feel better. So with that being said, coaches can really play a role, a positive role. So if coaches are intentional in developing social and emotional skills in their athletes, and they can create an environment that fosters these skills. So really emphasizing that you care about your athletes' physical well-being as well as their mental and emotional well-being. And coaches can really de-stress, dial down anxiety, and offset some of the trauma that their athletes might be experiencing. So we'll take a look at some actionable items here, what you can do. So self-regulation and care is really important. It's a difficult time for everyone right now. So you need to take care of yourself first before you can really be there for others. Focus on check-ins. Ask kids how they're doing, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Normalize conversations about mental health. Include mental health in discussions about strategy and team culture, and really emphasize that you care about them more in life than in sport, and you care about their physical as well as their mental well-being. You can provide examples of well-known athletes discussing mental health. This sort of really shows them that it's okay to talk about mental and emotional well-being. And in fact, it's normal and it's important to do so. And for maybe older athletes who are competing, you can really draw the distinction that it's really both physical and mental health that results in good performance. So include mental health referrals and suggestions also in addition to physical referrals. We take measures to prevent physical injury. Maybe you can recommend some measures that they can use to bolster their mental well-being. Maybe you include a list of referrals. Maybe you have some doctors and PTs that you recommend when any of your athletes get physically injured. You could add a few mental health providers to that list if anyone's struggling on that front. So before I wrap up here, I just want to touch on the importance of BKL and the greater BKL community. So get everyone involved. Every parent, child, and family member has a role to play in BKL. BKL relies so much on awesome volunteer support from families. And we really encourage family involvement, and you can also collaborate with clubs around you if that's possible. Just really broaden that community base and show kids that the BKL is a fun, inclusive, and supportive community. So just some concluding thoughts here to wrap up. Through the BKL, we're building a foundation for our children, and we must look long-term. This presentation was titled Long-Term Athlete Development, but really I see it as long-term person development. We want to think beyond a race or a practice. Don't focus on wins and losses, but on the core values and principles we want kids to take away from sport. The purpose of youth sport is not only to develop better athletes, but better people. And so I want to leave you with a quote from Bill and Kate in their piece For the Love of Our Children, which is that not every child can come in first, but everyone can challenge themselves, learn from experiences, encourage each other, and celebrate together. And that is all from me. And that is very little me at my first BKL festival getting my bib signed by Bill Koch. So I'll open the floor to any questions that folks have. And I'll close out here. A question from Nicholas. Best practices for mixing ages and phases. Our club has one coach for kids 6 to 12 in phases 1 to 3. So I think you can definitely, you have to do a little more planning ahead, especially with different speeds that are going to come out of that. But there are a lot of ways you can structure games with, as like Brian actually mentioned, the speed matched relays, or I'll have kids sometimes if we go on a long ski together, they'll yo-yo out and back. So the faster kids, when you get to the intersection, you have to turn around and come back and meet back up with the group, so they can kind of yo-yo back and forth. Definitely if you're doing drills in the field or games are a really awesome way to mix kids with different abilities. So it definitely takes a little more planning to keep a group semi close together when you know, some are a lot faster and some are a lot slower. But it's definitely possible. And I think it's also, in that context, really key to sort of stress to the group that we respect where everyone's at with their own abilities, and that we sort of, everyone's trying and everyone's learning and everyone's growing, and we respect that. And we have a question: what are some of the best ways to adapt to no snow days? Yeah, so you can take a lot of the games that you would play without snow, or with snow, and do them without snow. You can also, obviously, there's a lot of ski drills that don't really work when you can't glide, but there's also plenty of other drills that you can do with kids. You can do some running with poles. Yeah, there's some ideas, and if you want, we could talk more in depth on that. But yeah, I would say games, drills, you know, if you can go for a hike, that can be pretty fun. But yeah, incorporating poles, running with poles, that makes it a little more ski specific if that's what you're after. And if kids have, you don't want to do this with their nice skis, but if kids have skis that don't mind kind of ruining, you can put them on skis on grass and go up and down a hill, and that's pretty fun, with like a hose to wet it down, and they can like glide down the hill and then ski back up. And then we have a question from Alice, sorry, is there a regional approach during pandemic in place? I maybe have a follow-up question to that a little bit. I'm curious if you're referring to maybe the festival or just for clubs in general. If you want to chime in and clarify, Alice, that would be great. Oh, we also have a question on similar, maybe perhaps to Alice's question, from Rob about wondering if there is national regional guidance on BKL COVID precautions. So we don't, as of right now, NENSA doesn't have anything specifically outlined for clubs. We do have guidelines for our events, which could be applied to clubs. I would also be happy to connect clubs with other club leaders who have some guidelines in place. And we are looking at protocols for the festival. We have those outlined, a rough outline at the moment with contingency plans that we'll keep working on as we learn more and get closer. So we don't have any specific club guideline right now, but we have event guidelines, and US Ski and Snowboard is creating national guidelines for their events. So I would say there's event guidelines, there's less around individual club guidelines. And I think part of the difficulty with creating those, especially in New England, is that each state is so different that we would essentially need to create a guideline for each state, and it continues changing. So I think it would be hard to put in a national or regional guidance for BKL specifically, unless it included sort of categories for each state, I would say. And maybe hopefully that spoke to Alice's question as well. But we are looking into regional or state-based events for the festival. I'm in communication with our hosts, and we want to have a really positive experience for the kids. We don't want to limit who can participate in the festival, and we realize that we get a lot of kids at the festival, which is really awesome, and probably not 800 people gathering in one place right now kind of boggles the mind. And so we really want to create a positive experience, no matter what that might be on a state or district basis, with support from NENSA and from the host venue. So
I think if folks might not totally know, looking at the COVID considerations button on our webpage would be a really good resource. And also if we could share some of the health screening information somehow, Kate,
for sure.
with this group, which
Yeah.
we've been using for technique clinics and the distance competitions we've been holding.
Yeah, definitely. So if any club wants to reach out, and we have a form, we've been using a pre-event screening that folks fill out online, and then a morning of verbal screen, and we'd be more than happy to send those along that could be adapted to your club. I'm also going to drop the our COVID guidelines into the chat here. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can click on the festival button, and that will bring you to our current contingency plans for that. Doesn't look like it. If anyone else wants to jump in the chat or on the call, let me know.
Yeah, this is Brian. I'd be happy to add a little bit more to your suggestions as it relates to the question relating to, you have one coach and you have a variety of different age categories and experience levels of athletes. Number one, the best is to do collaboration at the beginning of a workout. And that's when the mind and the body is most prepared to learn skill. And one of your best teaching skills is actually your athletes. So as a coach, one of the goals is to build leaders in your athletes. So maybe the older athletes, a little more experienced, work with the younger athletes. And that only is effective if it's a safe environment, emotionally safe environment. So it's like teaching your more experienced athletes to coach and lead your younger athletes. And that sort of collaboration and cooperation will raise the bar of your whole program. So just to clarify, learn skill early in the workout, have them all together and learn, and you can still do that in a COVID safe, physically distanced or socially distanced, where they can be more than 6 feet behind and just follow. And then your older athletes, after they do the skill rich work with your younger kids, they can go and do their longer training. So that's a best practice or best principle for that sort of environment.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in there, Brian. I believe Nicholas was speaking to the fact that they only have one coach. So my guess is, well, you probably could send if the older kids are competent enough to go off on their own. But I think he was sort of wondering if you could speak to, like, I think the whole group needs to stay together the whole practice, I believe, was sort of his challenge.
Yeah, I think in that environment, they obviously, if you stay in a relatively close proximity where you're in eye shot, but the older athletes can still ski out and be faster. And the younger kids kind of stay a little bit more consolidated. And then, the younger kids can hop on behind them for like 30 seconds or whatever it might be for a short bit. But the general premise is kind of the same. As you first have to create, as you did a really good job of outlining, like a socially safe environment. And part of that is where we as coaches come into play there, is teaching our more experienced athletes to work with our younger athletes. So using them as leaders and teachers.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Thank you all for joining me tonight. And I really appreciated the discussion and hearing from you all. And please do reach out with questions, any follow-up questions or anything that comes up. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you and have a good night.